Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Musician's Mentor podcast. My name is Travis Mark. I'll be your host. And today, we're talking with a very good friend of mine, Mr. Wess Walker. Wess is a multi-instrumentalist, producer, songwriter, singer. He does it all. He also builds guitars, which, let me tell you, they're incredible. And we really barely touched the surface in this interview. Wess has produced bands like the Florida Georgia Line. He tours and is a kind of revolving member with singer-songwriter Payton Smith. We've played a bunch of club gigs together with Pagey Prine and Southern Soul down here in New Orleans. He's just a cool dude, man. And what I like about him is he thinks a lot further than just playing a gig, which we talk about a lot in this interview. Wess and I bonded over some sort of motivational stuff outside of gigs, and we've had many discussions about just musician life. So without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Wess Walker. Hey, dude, how's it going?
Hey, how's it going, Travis?
Good, man. How you doing?
Good, man. Hopefully this cell phone signal is going to work better at this point.
Yeah, that sounds way better already.
Yeah.
So
Cool.
I think it'll be great, you know?
Cool.
So Wess, we were on the phone a little bit earlier just discussing what we kind of may or may not talk about during this thing. And as discussed with you already, the idea behind this whole thing is to kind of just share some insights or some mindsets about the music industry and the music business, and, you know, discuss maybe some ups and downs, just some tips or survival tips, if you will, for musicians who are trying to sort of implement different things within their careers, or maybe up and comers who are trying to become musicians, full-time musicians, or anything like that. So before we get going, just so whoever might be listening to this has a better idea of where you're coming from, could you maybe just give us a quick little summary about who you are, what you do, maybe a couple things you've done, what you're currently up to, et cetera, et cetera?
Oh, cool. Well, so, you know, I pretty well started playing music at a kid age. You know, as a child, I was playing in a band. My mother, you know, sang in at the age of like 10 to 12 years old. And there was some traveling involved and, around the United States and that sort of thing. So that kind of gave me a pretty good inclination that, hey, I can use my talent and be happy and do these things and feel like I'm growing at a very young age. And of course, way later than that, I figured out about monetizing that. And so I had a kind of a ramp into being a musician, you know, with what was fostered from my parents. So, but you know, that kind of put me in a special spot because at the time that, you know, as a kid, you don't really have to, pay bills and things like that. So my situation was just kind of, you know, let me know that this is something I really want to do, something I'm good at, all that kind of thing. But, later in life, you start having to pay for things, you know, and keep that kind of thing going. So, you know, I did go kind of full on into music. I went to college. I graduated. I was homeschooled. I graduated at 16 years old, went to local state college here at 16 for music. And I guess probably after a couple of semesters of that, I never forget my professor. He's got a doctor's degree, and master's degree in this and doctor's degree in that and this and that. And, you know, she was, you know, my professor in music, and she's calls me in to her office about 10 minutes before class started, and she asked me what it was that I wanted to do with the degree. And I said, well, you know, like I just kind of headed on this musical path, you know, it was supported, you know, and kind of kind of fired up with my mother singing in a band, um, and all that kind of thing. So I just want to do music for a living. And this is what I know to do to solidify me a place in the music industry. And she said, well, unless you want to do what I'm doing, teaching at a college, and or a handful of other things, as far as traditionally, playing symphony type thing, or orchestra, or that type of deal. Maybe you should consider just going play music for a living, and start in some bar rooms. Or, I'm 16 years old and I have a 55 plus year old woman telling me this. It was almost in one point in life, the adults are telling me to cut the corners and just go for it. And I was left to sort of figure that out, as an adult, what that really meant. And, so, my early situation with music was kind of built in, playing in a church setting, played some really great music in church setting, a lot of gospel stuff growing up in South Louisiana near New Orleans. The flavors and all that were pretty awesome. So fast forward, get married first time, at the age of 20. Now I have bills to pay and someone else to keep after, and still doing some pretty big things in, Christian music, and then, starting to go into a bunch of sessions and things like that, that were actually paying. And it kind of just went on from there. I think I realized, getting sort of an early start, that I wanted to be a record producer, and I don't really want to be a player, just a player. I want to make music, but formulating, records and songs and how they sound and what they're going to be like, who's going to be on it, all that kind of thing. And long story shorter, I think that, when I moved to Nashville, I've been in Nashville now for, I guess, between 15 and 20 years. I've lived there for 15 years. And working in the country markets and things, and producing independent records. It just, it kind of put me in a spot where I had choices to make regarding, do I want to go down the traditional route of, I need to know this person, I need to know this person, I need to know that person, versus, some of this music I'm making really just doesn't fill my soul, you
Yeah.
know. And from an artist standpoint, I would say that, it really kind of, my earlier musical experiences with touring as a kid, I wasn't aware of those things. So all of that to say, as far as music goes, um, you know, I've kind of done a wide scope of things, as a musician and as a producer and that kind of thing. But learning point A, where you are right now, and understanding realistically what point B you would really like it to be, that kind of tells you what it is you have to do. And the whole way through that is finding things that move you, because, um, I was having a conversation with an artist I just finished a record with earlier regarding, um, this guy, was a professional drummer. He's touring internationally, and he decides that he, wants to have a family, and he laid down touring and got a day gig that was at a music store, still playing bar gigs and clubs and things, and nothing wrong with any of that. But he found something solid, and, that would pay him to be able to stay home and still be able to play music and that kind of thing. And fast forward a long time later, up until him and I cut this record recently, and he's a 52-year-old guy that's teaching school, teaching at a high school, the drum line, and he's playing gigs, um, and he's making some great music, but just not really filled up with it. And so I think that once we started recording his original music for the first time ever, uh, that really he felt was a good representation of himself. He sort of cut himself off from playing the bar gigs.
Hmm.
because his point B was happening, you know.
Yeah.
And so anyway, I just thought that was really universal and interesting, you know. And so I say that in comparison to his story and where I started off, I've been really blessed to be able to work with some of the artists that I work with in Nashville. I mean, I was able to, through friendship and relationships, which is totally key. Produced Florida Georgia Line, a country duo. I produced their very first independent release, which led them to, some cuts. Jason Aldean in 2012, and a couple other things. Certainly not taking any credit, but in this sort of situation, I wind up doing some of those things and some other great records that are still bringing royalties without going on to name names, and that kind of thing. And some of those things were musically filling to the soul, as I said a while ago, and some of them were just kind of a paycheck. And I think that sort of where I figured out I would like to be is things that move me seem to be, things that I want to be a part of more regular than just go and make money on a gig, because playing music in front of people on a stage, one of the biggest blessings that I think that is like a light clicked on. If I am on a stage in front of 150 people in a club versus 50,000 people in an arena show, if my head is not of my thought process and my focus is not based off of me being here on this stage with these musicians, because I love making this music with these musicians. That the crowd shouldn't matter. And when the times that I did let that matter and affect me in my performance, that was when you listen back to the recordings of those things. It's like, I kind of screwed this up here, or I didn't really do this there. What am I doing? All this kind of stuff. So I
Yeah.
would definitely, sticking with opportunities, even right from the jump, that, getting a radar on what moves you,
Yeah, you got to trust your instincts, you know? I mean,
Yes.
there's so many things we could go into from what you sort of just spoke about. So I want to kind of just dig away at some of that stuff before we get further. So a
Sure.
couple things. I know you spend your time sort of between Nashville, Tennessee and Louisiana. Um,
Yes.
so I was gonna. You obviously grew up in Louisiana. You covered that. What was the first instrument you started playing? Because I know, like myself, you're a multi instrumentalist. And listen, I know that people use that term lightly. You and I have had many discussions about the multi instrumentalist thing, and it's quite funny because people will see you in the role of whatever instrument it is you're playing on that particular gig, and suddenly it gets assumed that that's all you do. And then sometimes to break away from that, maybe breakaway is the wrong term, but they don't sort of think that you can actually play these other instruments. And now I've done gigs with you. I mean, you're an incredible bass player. You're an incredible guitarist. I've never actually seen you drum, but I've heard you're an incredible drummer. I've heard songs you've written. You're obviously a great all rounder. What was the first one you started on, and what led you
Drums.
to
Yeah.
try and do all the others?
I sing drums. And then I'm also a singer. So, I had a conversation the other day with someone that's like, hey, how do you play guitar like that? And kind of trying to read into to answer them specifically what they're specifically asking me. It seemed like, how do you play guitar like that, was not how do you play so fast, or how do you play slide that well, and that kind of thing. It was basically, I started with drums, which is sort of meter, time,
Yeah.
math behind it, and then having, the singing thing and songwriting thing that sort of gives me the notes. And so that sort of puts me on the path of, why I play guitar. But to answer you a little more direct, I played drums first. I was playing drums in the band with my mom. That was, we were touring with that. And I actually moved on to bass guitar next. And I think that sort of opened the door for me with understanding the placement on guitar and notes and chording and all that kind of thing. And Actually, guitar was sort of last because I say last as far as like a core group of bass, guitar, drums, piano. So drums, bass, guitar, piano. I started to learn a lot about chording and voicing and that kind of thing, and then guitar next. But all that to say, um, I think just having a love for making music, not playing music and regurgitating it, but having a early love for making and manufacturing. You know, music is sort of where I started all that. Of course, later on, I was able to use that professionally and get better at it because of what is good versus what is different. I've just more opportunities and more situations allowed me to kind of expound on all those things, and really takes paying attention to the song and setting music free versus what lick I can do so cool.
Exactly. Exactly. And again, I think you and I've had a couple discussions about that, but maybe that's the benefit of, trying to pick up another instrument. It definitely, I mean, I remember when I first started playing guitar. I mean, I only started playing guitar a couple of months after I picked up the drumsticks. So they're very close. I've been playing them for the same sort of amount of time. But people used to say to me, "Oh, you should try and play a melodic instrument. It'll make you a better drummer." And there was a part of my brain. I mean, I was a kid, so there was a part of my brain that was like, yeah, whatever, man. I want to spend more time on drums." But in hindsight, I'm so glad I did because, like you say, it opens up these different channels. And if you then fast forward to your sort of production vocation, if you want to use that term, it's kind of like what I've always liked about it is, you know, not so much when I'm a sideman in people's bands. I know my role. I kind of just do what I'm expected to do. But in bands that I've led, or when I am in studio and have the opportunity to work on somebody's song or something they want my opinion, the benefit of just having that little bit of extra knowledge, even if it's not multiple instruments, I kind of feel like it just allows you to understand where the melodic instruments are coming from if you're a rhythm player, or if you're a melodic player, where the rhythm is coming from if you've maybe spent a bit of time. So would you say, how easy was the transition from you from player to producer? I mean, you were talking about you kind of started to figure out you wanted to do things that moved you. So when did you get your first production sort of gig? How old were you? Were you nervous? And how did you get it?
I wasn't to go right to the nervous thing. I don't think that the situation that I was in would have allowed me to be nervous because it was very grassroots, and it was, a church I was playing music at. There was a studio there. No one, it's small town. No one really knew about it. I became interested enough to dive into that and that kind of thing. So, I that also later taught me that, being nervous is not going to do anything but be distracting. It's like you learn a lesson and the light clicks on what the lesson is later on, type of thing. But I think my first recordings as producing as a producer, not professionally, but as a novice, was probably 14, 15, 16, those ages, kind of starting to mess with the buttons and figure out the gear and all that kinds of stuff.
Cool.
And transitioning as a professional producer, I believe I got my first paid producing gig when I was maybe 18, 19 years old. And it was absolutely terrible. Everything I had learned, all the heart that I was putting in it, I can listen back to it today and think to myself, man, I really got distracted with how cool is this studio? Who am I recording with? They're looking to me as this wearing this hat, and so the biggest thing that I think that I learned was, you know, I'll use that term, setting music free again. Not standing in the way with guitar licks or drum licks or whatever, but creating music in general is kind of what makes those recordings really, I guess fill my soul and everyone else's soul that was part of it, touch you and that kind of thing. And it was a couple of years of having to pay folks to mix records that I had recorded, and there's a whole gauntlet of things that come with that. Like who engineered the record? That would have been me, capturing the sounds. Well, you send that to a mix guy, and then that's what he has to work with. And I wasn't super great at it in the beginning, and um, luckily I was able to work with some engineers that did mixing, that kind of was able to shine the light on capturing good, clean sounds and what are you using, and being aware of early reflections and things like that, and not playing too much and covering up the vocal. If you're covering up the vocal, you're covering up the lyrics, and all that sort of thing. But the transition is, I like to think of it as still happening.
Yeah.
Really, in a way, because you know, music in general is like a language. It's like a form of communication. You would be surprised how many people understand the language but can't speak the language. So those who can speak it, kind of have to focus on sticking to the basics. Really, Chick Corea, incredible musician, so many out there, but Chick Corea, fusion jazz and all this kind of stuff is not for the everyday listener, even though it's such beautiful music. It kind of takes an understanding to really understand it. It's like tasting fine wine. If you give fine wine to someone that doesn't know what fine wine should taste like, they're going to probably think it doesn't taste that great.
Yeah.
And that type of thing. So, versus somebody like Levon Helm. Levon Helm, in his solo career is very down to earth and story driven, and it's lyrical, and that kind of thing. So, I think that I don't know, I think that being able to pay attention to some key factors, like who's the audience that's going to be listening to your music. You can't really you really kind of don't get a chance to choose that outside of who you're going to give it to or try and sell it to at a show, and that kind of thing. So being very universal minded about, okay, so I wrote this song, or I wrote a song that an artist is gonna cut, and I'm gonna produce this song or whatever. I think that just makes so much sense to be thinking about how not to cover it up, and that really helped my transition into being a professional record producer. And it even in a monetary sense, it put me in a gaining position, because look, anyone that listens to this is going to have more elements to pick up on and use, for really digging it, really enjoying it, and being able to sit there and listen to the whole album, not just part of a song. Okay, next part of a song. Okay, next. Okay, yeah, good job, Wes.
Yeah.
That,
Yeah, that makes
so yeah,
sense.
the transitioning thing. I think that if you're not continually transitioning into you know, um, not continually transitioning, into something better, and better meaning
Yeah, just
I guess,
constantly growing, just
yeah,
constantly trying to get better and
yeah, you kind of
grow.
never make it to the top. I mean, regardless to how many ropes you climb and ring bells at the top and come down and get an award or have some royalties come in and that kind of thing. Um, I heard someone say once, "How are you going to top the next album with this artist?" And it's like, well, what does that mean?
Yeah.
You're not topping anything. It's just more communicating, more sharing. You know.
Yeah, and again, to go back to something you mentioned when we first started, it's like if it doesn't sort of touch your soul, it doesn't matter how great it is. I mean, I've definitely been guilty in my life of hearing something that everybody around me thought was just genius. And at the time, I listened to it and I guess I didn't get it. But then I revisit later or at a different time, a different day, a different mind space, whatever it is, and I get it. And it's like that can happen. I mean, it's happened with so many great records in history. It's like there's some incredible records out there, like you say with the Chick Corea thing. It's like some people, it's just not their bag. So I think as long as you, as a musician, are trying to grow and push forward, and I'm not saying you got to reinvent the wheel, but like, if you're being true to yourself and it moves you, it's going to move somebody else too. You
Yeah.
might just, like you say, you've got no control over that. It's might move millions, it might move one, but
Well,
just be honest about it.
yeah, it kind of hits me like, and it's not the same thing for everything, but imagine if you are trying to console someone. I kind of pair that with a sad song that has a happy ending. In just one example, it's a lot easier to console someone if you know that person and have known them for a long time. Some back history and that kind of thing. You can bring up positive points. So let's say they've lost someone to death. You can speak on some of those happy points and be positive and kind of help pull them out of that funk. With the listener, you don't really have that background. With a new listener that's never heard of you before, you don't really have that background. So being very keen and tuned up on what it is that you're trying to do with your music is very key, because you get the one shot really, unless they listen again, and that's up to them. But you get that one shot to be very honest and very open, and not cover anything up. And with, like I say, so what if I could play 1,000 notes in a second on a guitar? That's really cool. But what does anyone take from that? Oh wow, that guy can play really fast and he's a very accomplished musician. It doesn't really do anything other than have wow factor. Wow factor doesn't really stick like, man, have you heard this song? You got to hear this song. I know we lost our dad today, hypothetically speaking. I know we lost our dad today, and they play this song at their funeral, and this song reminds me of them. Well, what does this song remind me of them? Why does it remind me of them? Most likely the lyrics and not drumming or funky bass lines or whatever. So, being kind of keyed into, um, you know, in your writing and then in the recording. I mean, there's been a great amount of really great songs that, hindsight, I listen back to, that I recorded songs with artists as a record producer. And I feel like, man, production kind of covered this up. You sort of lose that factor. So, connecting is really about getting out of the way and letting the song, to not be cliche, but let the song sort of speak what it was supposed to speak in the beginning and support that,
Yeah. Yeah, let it do
Um,
its thing.
yeah. I just recorded a record with a guy, Troy Perkle, here in Louisiana. Known him for a long time, was very inspired by him as a young musician. I remember 16 years old, I walked into a place where I had never heard uh, Superstition played for the first time. And, a lot of people can have their initial opinion on that song. It's not really like deep lyrics or whatever and that kind of thing. But
It's a great
regardless,
song.
yeah, it's a great song. And he was, the way he was playing and singing it. It was, it's like it wasn't really in depth on the playing. He wasn't throwing drumsticks all over the kit everywhere, but yet there was something that really hit me about that, and it was the fact that it was so simply played, and it was about the song and all that kind of stuff. And fast forward, man, 20 whatever years, now I'm produced a record on him, and we were able to record his record in very much the same way, and it's very simple and sounds, and I can't take any credit for this phrase, but definitely there is something behind the space between the notes is far more important than the notes themselves.
Yeah.
And every time I record a record, that's what I'm looking for.
Yeah.
You know, this space. It is time to think because someone can fire off 100 lines of some really profound stuff, and if they do it in a row, they don't. You don't remember line 49. You
Yeah.
don't remember. You know, and so that's real important to me, and seemingly to a lot of accomplished musicians. You can tell when someone is feeling and operates accomplished, under the feeling of being accomplished. They were able to say what it is they wanted to say and communicate because it's a language.
Completely.
And most times, those are people that have a huge following because the masses can grab onto that and understand it, immediately.
Yeah. Well, it's quite funny because when I was a kid and I'm learning all these licks and trying to practice all these chops and these fancy impress musician things, that's totally what I was into, and like I would see these, I don't want to use the term older because now I'm that age, but I would see these older musicians because I was gigging as a teenager and I would think, man, they could do this there and they could fill this space and they could do this. And as I myself started to get older, I realized that there's certain musicians, even very accomplished musicians, who sound like they keep things very simple. But I think it's very easy to get blindsided by the technique stuff and then listen to those simple songs and think, oh, these guys aren't as good as those guys because these guys are thrashing at 200 BPM and these guys are playing three chords. But there's a maturity that happens, or at least it's happened to me. And talking to you on the times we have, I know it's happened to you as well. It's like there's definitely a maturity that happens where you start to understand that, like you say, I don't want to use the term less is more, but less is more. And if you look at the really timeless records, there's a reason why they're timeless. I mean, the fact that everybody can sing the guitar solo from Hotel California versus many other songs by guitarists who Joe Walsh would probably think are just highly accomplished. It says a lot about how people listen and relate to music.
Yes. Yeah.
So tell me, a bit of a tough one, but let's try and cover a couple sort of, whether you want to call them mistakes or learning curves, that you've maybe experienced as both a sort of gigging musician and then as a producer slash songwriter. What are some of the things you've maybe done and then afterwards thought, ah, shit, or or maybe you didn't even think that, but you learnt along the way that, okay, I can do this better because of A, B, and C, or I need to learn from that lesson to not do this or not do that.
Man, I'd know just what the answer is. There's a lot of them that I guess I could mention, but I think probably one of the most important is relationships. Having relationships and what the quality of the relationship is, and what the motive is for recording professional released music. And so what I mean by that is, you know, I guess you probably see it more in like bar gigs, or clubs and things like that. Um, the motive for being there, the general consensus across the board of the musicians that are playing these gigs, the motive for being there most times seems to be, and I could be wrong, but most times in everything I've seen, seems to be to kind of make a buck and jam a little bit. And that's really polar opposite to, making records that is a snapshot, one snapshot of these songs being played. You know, the motive. I think the motive behind recording, music, like I say, across the board of who's involved, has to be right, because if it's a jamming kind of record, then everybody's going to be there to jam. If it's a singer songwriter record, it's going to be very much, or should be very much, about the lyrics and the message and that kind of thing. So I think one of the things that I got wrong, or in my path of growth, I have recognized, hindsight, is recording and making music and playing music with people that are there for all the same reason, and then all the same reason that I'm also there to do it, is a big thing. I have recorded a lot of music that has made money, in terms of like royalties and playing shows and things like that. And really, it's kind of like a casino. It's just a bunch of bells and whistles going off, and it's high energy, and it's just going. And even if you sell a lot of records, and even if you sell a lot of merch and all that kinds of stuff, it's kind of what it is. And then there's James Taylor. you know, you go to a James Taylor concert or listen to the record. I guess it's kind of parallel to some things I've already said, but you can tell that the motive behind the making of the music that was made and that we all listened to and have heard, is, the motive is all the same. So I would definitely say one of the big things that one of the big mistakes I made was having the wrong motive. Climbing the ladder, so to speak. Oh, I should take this opportunity because this is going to put me in a new pool of people, and then the music was not really reflective of anything other than that.
Yeah. So kind of like manifesting, thinking what you
Mhm.
want, being clear about it, and I guess trying to manifest it until it happens versus getting sidetracked and taking all these different side streets instead of just trying to work towards your destination, right?
Yeah, I told my daughter, and I'm still telling her, at the age of 15, like, what you practice is what you get good at.
Yeah.
And so, if someone practices lying, they get good at it. Somebody practices guitar, they get good at it. If someone practices, a healthy focus, they get good at it.
Yeah.
It's
What's
the
what's
way.
that? What's that? Sorry, I don't mean to interrupt you. There's that famous saying. I can't remember who said it, but um, results come where energy goes, or something like that.
Yeah,
You know.
totally.
So, and it's totally true. I mean, again, you and I have had many discussions about these kinds of things. So let's sort of take a bit of a diversion here for a second. You've used the word monetize a couple times, and obviously, a big part about being a musician is, making money. It's not just all about sitting in a bar with your friends drinking beer all night, like a lot of people seem to think. So, what advice could you give listeners, especially up and coming ones who are maybe trying to turn this into a profession, about money? What I know that's a real broad subject, but I personally believe there is money in this industry, even though people seem to constantly tell me that there's not. I've never done anything else. This is how I live. This is how I make my living. I've owned houses and businesses. I've got cars. I'm not a millionaire, but I live comfortably, and I feel very blessed to do so. So I know that guys like you also diversify and do a few other things. I'm sure we'll get into that still during this chat. But what money advice could you give young musicians? And I don't mean that from an age perspective. I mean musicians who are new to this and they're trying to figure out how to handle money.
Well, I think the general rule is, obviously don't spend more than you make. I think anyone could say that. That's just math. But you know, I think that's an interesting question because I sort of did things a little different, than a lot of musicians have done, and it doesn't make me any more special or anything like that. But I think because of time, you sort of learn lessons. You learn lessons about, okay, so um, I need to do something for money. This is what I need to make, to stay alive. And what that really equates to is what is it that I can do that helps me stay focused? Really, I have to focus on eating, having a roof over my head, having clothes to wear, all these things. And then I also have to keep in my focus of making music that I want to make and grow in that. And I think that, playing in clubs, there's nothing wrong with it, at all. I mean, I've played in a whole lot of them. Um, and I think that, speaking about what I did a little differently was to get passive incomes, something outside of that. And I also realized at one point that me working on a serious professional career in music, like I talked about, the artist I recently recorded with, Troy Perkle, quitting playing the bar gigs and the club gigs because they didn't fill them up. Well, that may be different for someone else, And so I think that, it's kind of a deep subject to get off in because, um, you know, the things that I make money with outside of music are completely unrelated to music, you know, and that kind of thing. And so, like I find it very hard to the thought of playing in clubs or even touring at times really brings me to the point of what am I spending time on? I'm spending time on, I got to go here and be here for this time and fly here and go play these gigs and, playing for other artists and things like that. Yeah, that pays the bills and whatever size paycheck comes from that, is what it is, but not everybody has that situation, and that kind of thing. So I would think that as far as money goes, it's very smart to look at all the wonderful opportunities this world currently and has for a long time and will continue to have offers you a way to make money outside of making music because you know I've been a general contractor in the state of Tennessee. I'm not doing any of the work, but I'm kind of the guy responsible for it since probably 2012, somewhere in there.
Wow.
And so I'm a hands-on guy. I've built custom guitars for a living, professionally, for an international audience of that, buyers and that kind of thing, working for a company, and that was close to music, but it wasn't really music. It was making musical instruments. So that kind of taught me I can do something outside of music that is fulfilling, but it also also pays the bills. Inadvertently, it helped me to focus on the music I really wanted to make.
Yeah.
And I think it's really important to figure out, kind of have that talk with yourself. Hey, look, nothing in life comes for free, and you have to work at everything. Again, you practice doing something, you get good at it, whatever it is. It could be good or bad. But I think that money for me has really been tied heavily to, okay, so I have a financial need, but also have a need to stay focused on music that really fills me up and makes me feel like lets me know I'm gonna know whether or not it's moving the needle or not.
Yeah.
And you can do that professionally in the music business and that kind of thing. But I can't really think of too many professional session players in Nashville or LA or whatever. I can't really think of too many that don't have some type of other passive income. I mean, that could be in the form of being a gearhead and knowing drums, round batch Gretsch drums from the 50s all the way to guitar players and guitar amps and guitars and all this kind of stuff. There's kind of a constant trade and flip and that kind of thing. But there's something monetary that comes from that. None of that's playing music.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
It's
Just a
you
skill you
know
pick up along the way
it's
if you
so
pay
you pick up
attention.
along the way, yeah. And so really, I think the subject of money as a musician is monetizing something that you're interested in. And I mean, I could be interested in golf all day long, and I could go on to be a multi-billionaire as a golfer. But if that's if that's not something I'm going to pour my whole life into, being a golfer is kind of like being a musician. You kind of have to put effort into that, and it becomes a big part of your life. So, I mean, look at how many great actors and actresses that are singers as well. It's still art
Yeah.
that they're doing. They're monetizing with art. I didn't do that. I monetized, my time with things other than art so that I could stay focused on it. So I don't think there's any real wrong way, to do it. But I just always look at, actors and actresses that are singers as well. And it's like they're known most for their acting, but they totally have like pro bands and they're going out playing shows and that kind of stuff. It's what they spent their time, that's what they spend their time on, making art. And just because they're known for one thing does not mean they don't have the other. And I think being okay with the fact that you are a whole person filled with many desires and working on all of the desires and having a sort of a plan to do so in front of you is really key. I have a need to make things with wood or metal or whatever, and I figured out a way to monetize that, whether it be building guitars very close to music industry, players, all that kinds of stuff, making sounds. There've also been a good contracting thing. That's just my needs. So I think that there's something behind that, as far as money goes. If you are not paying your bills, get a job,
Yeah.
because that is going to allow you to be able to focus on things that you want to focus on, and that's completely fine. And quite frankly, I would even be as forward as to say, if you're not doing that, you're going the wrong direction.
Yeah.
It's okay. It's fine. We are humans and artists first.
Yeah. Well, dude, I mean, so we were talking a little bit before we hit record, and I was sort of saying to you that, like, it's a bit of an occurrence or reoccurrence with me that some of my part-time musician friends will sometimes phone me. It's typically around the beginning of the new year each year, and they'll be like, "Hey, bro, like, hey, I'm gonna quit the job, man. I'm gonna quit the job, and I'm gonna do the full time music thing, you know." And great, like, listen, if that's what you want to do, by all means, I'm a big believer in following your heart. I mean, that's pretty much what this whole discussion has been about. But
Yeah.
I think some guys, you know, they they put their energy in the wrong place again, which we've seemed to repeat a couple times during this conversation. But having a job and working as what many people call a weekend warrior is not a bad thing. I mean, I've known guys who've done it and they've lived really well.
Yeah.
And they get
Yeah.
to, like, they kind of get to let loose or put their hair down, if you wanna use that phrase, um, during those weekend gigs or that odd week gig that they do. And I mean, they usually have really good gear because their day job pays for it. And I think a
Yeah.
lot of people have this mindset that, oh, if I'm not doing this 24 hours a day, I'm a failure. But you know, one thing that I keep sort of reiterating in these conversations is you don't have to be a a rich and famous musician to have a career. You can do this in many different shapes and form. So I think just exploring the different possibilities of oneself is a great thing. And
Yeah.
also you might learn something about yourself that you didn't know. You could have been really good at, I don't know, let's use something random, baking cakes, but you've never
Yes.
taken the time to bake the cake because you're so focused on this. It could be you could find things out about yourself that maybe you've never learned.
That brings me back to something I was saying earlier about motive during a recording process, and that was one thing I got wrong. Um, I would very easily venture out and say that that is, unless it is the motive to just pair, you know, um, a crossroads type of thing, meaning you've got, John Mayer and Brad Paisley. There was a series, I think CMT, or I could have that wrong, was putting on for a while, and it was called Crossroads. And so you have one great musician and artist from one genre, and they pair them with another genre, and they do a show or they do a recording or whatever, and they play one of each other's songs back to back, one after the other show, and that kind of thing. And I I I totally believe that there is two elements there, and that is, every one of those that I saw, I can't see where, as far as the artist that were playing, I can't see where they both were not enjoying that. But initially, when those things are put together, it is kind of the wow factor that is trying to be sold. So if you are not John Mayer and Brad Paisley and already have these musical careers going, then spending time on doing that sort of thing, just kind of stuffing something into a box. If you don't have that thing already worked out, then it probably wouldn't be the same, really, in a way, unless that's something you just really enjoy doing. But um, like I say, I mean, you know, um, I don't know. I mean, I think that if you can really kind of get an idea of what it is that you want to be. I tell my daughter, another thing I tell my daughter is, you have to know where point A is to even begin to plan for point B, because it's going to take some strategic planning to get there. That could be financially, that could be time that you're spending, geographics, all that kind of stuff. So that you know, kind of soaking in that whole thought is, man, I really have to spend time on point A. I am a human being first.
Yeah.
I'm an artist.
Yeah.
This is the desire. The point A of the desire is to expound on my artistry and that kind of thing. So realistically, what does it take to do that? And in the last couple of years, that custom guitar company I was mentioning that I built guitars at a young age, I was in position to actually buy the company and started the process on that. And so in that, I had some meetings with the loan officer and that kind of thing, and they were talking about, and it was grant driven, actually, USDA rural development, and that was well, the conversation I had with the director herself um, was really interesting, because she was, talking about, um, being dedicated to what it is that you're doing, and all that kind of thing, and knowing what it is that you really want to go for, because there has to be an official business plan that makes the yes or no that we're going to give you this grant or not happen. And so of course they gave me all the resources to go down the road on that, and say, if a business plan comes from this particular person and they've checked off on it, that I will check off on it. And so what that meant was, and long and short of that is, I go and say, these are my desires. I would like to own this company. I would like to grow it. I'm not really sure how far I can grow this company, and really how much I can do. But these are some of the bullet points of things I want to do. And then I had to sit there and listen and agree to do it in the plan that they put before me. If you just do it this way from point A to point B, we can approve that. And I thought that was really interesting on a personal level, because in the end, if you are just wanting to play music to be rich and famous, probably not going to go that well. If you
Yeah.
just play music and making music to be seen, or to just jam with people and climb some sort of a ladder, probably not going to go that well.
Yeah.
So there's something really behind, to me, there's something really behind not covering it up. But you have to know what you're not going to cover up in the first place.
Yeah.
So, being in love with music, if you just like the way it feels to sit behind a drum set and hit drums and make sounds and that kind of stuff, man, great. Um, but if you want to share your music, with people so that they understand the message that you are trying to put out, that means you kind of have to have a message.
Yeah.
So that's a big thing. I mean, songwriters don't really have a problem with that. They're pretty sure they know what it is they want to share with people, and all of them like it.
Yeah.
It's harder for a musician in some ways because where's your distribution for your product? Somebody else's gig, playing somebody else's songs. So your motive for being in a group of people making music, you know, um, and playing songs and monetizing that, uh, it can go well on the monetary end of it, but it's going to get old and it's going to become a job, and
A
then
job.
now you're bring up what it is that you have inside of you that you really want to do. So learning how to come up with point A so you can get to whatever point B it is that you're wanting to be is a huge thing.
Totally. So, Wes, we're going to start wrapping up here, dude. I just want to kind of query just a couple things here, real quick. So, I mean, again, there's so much more to you than we can talk about in give or take an hour. Where can people get hold of you if they look into maybe cut a record with you, or or sort of maybe do some demos or some writing, or if they just want to get hold of you and ask a question? What's the best place for them to find you?
Man, I'm fairly simple. I have email address blacknotegroup@outlook.com, BLACKNOTEGROUP at outlook.com. And I'm always open to hear new music and ideas and requests, and you know um, whatever I can do to be helpful to whatever music community. I'm always game for that. um, and management looks through those emails and that kind of thing. So to be precise, what it is you're looking to do, I'm fairly open to those things. So
Cool.
that would be a great place.
Cool. And then my last two questions for you, really. This one's a little bit different to everything we spoke about before, but let's put the listener in the situation where they are a club musician, um, and they want to try and up their game. Maybe they're trying to get to a higher level of gigs, or maybe just get better gigs, or even just monetize their own gigs that they're currently on more. I know you hit the road with Payton Smith every now and then. So that's obviously a much higher level of gig than, say, your typical bar. So what advice would you give them on trying to take that step to get to either those gigs, or in the interim, better the gigs that they're currently doing to maybe just look like a more unified business, shall we say?
I would definitely say, if you are hanging around and spending your time around, the pool of people that you have been currently hanging around and spending the time, and if nothing is being aware of what is moving and what is not, and so if you hang around the club scene, you're guaranteed to probably get more club gigs. If you hang around the professional scene, then you're going to have more opportunities there. And so that sort of brings me to relationships, really. To be able to gain relationships with people obviously takes a great deal of couth and that kind of thing. But I think speaking up, for yourself, hey, look, I'm confident in what I do. I'm interested in this. Make your interest known, and be recording, to tell someone, hey, listen, I'm interested in being more in a position of where you are, you know, that other person is touring and playing stadiums at 40 and 50,000 people and all this kind of stuff. And that's something that I desire to do. That is sort of just letting a desire be known, which has to happen. But to have some type of a business card, you have to be doing, it's like, what are you doing between gigs? If you play 3 days a week and they're clumped up on the weekend, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, whatever it is, if you're a weekend guy and that's when your gigs are happening, it's very important to focus on what it is that you're doing in between those gigs to move the needle for your career. And so, some of those things could be, to record yourself playing, even if it's recording yourself playing there, on those gigs, that's cool. But, I would say recording as much as you can. And if you're not recording, to get in a situation of recording, because it's kind of like a business card. A musician can't really hand a business card to a tour manager and say, hey, yeah, if you ever need a drummer, hey, if you ever need a bass player, whatever it is, and say, give me a call. Well, they have really nothing to go off of. So I think some type of, it doesn't have to be overly some promo pack where, you're slinging sticks, twirling sticks and all that kind of stuff. But, giving yourself the opportunity to be seen and be heard on any level on the regular is probably very key, because, I'm a fairly open-minded musician and music maker. If someone says, hey, I want you to take a listen to this, I don't know the person, I'm most likely going to sit there and listen to it. Whereas other people aren't, because they kind of are on a track to know what is successful and what is not for what they're already doing. So I would definitely say, if you're not recording, making a business card, so to speak, whether it be recording in a studio in your house, or recording the gigs that you're playing, I would say that if you're not doing those things, that would probably be a good idea.
Yeah.
So have something to put out there in front of you. No one knows how well you play, regardless to how well the conversation went.
Yeah. It's great advice, man.
Yeah.
Well, dude, thank you so much for your time, man.
Man, thanks for the opportunity. It's always always a great time to play music with you, and appreciate the call.
Hey, I feel exactly the same, dude. And, again, we'll probably do it again sometime, because, I mean,
Yeah,
you and I've had so many discussions. I feel like we barely touched the surface, so.
yeah, and I've had so much coffee. I probably rabbit trailed a little bit, but hopefully some of the things I said ring home for someone.
Oh, dude, totally. And again, not to sound like a broken record, but the whole goal here is, even if a listener can take one thing from it,
Absolutely.
mission accomplished.
Yeah, certainly.
Well, Wes, thanks, buddy. I appreciate you,
Thanks.
man.
Appreciate you, bro. Talk
Yeah.
to you soon.
Talk to you soon, buddy.
Yeah.
Bye. There we have it. Mr. Wess Walker, everybody. Make sure you reach out to him if you've ever got any production queries or songwriting queries, or if you want to just talk music. He's really down to earth about that sort of stuff. My name's Travis Mark. You can find out more about me at travismark.com, or just check out musicians-mentor.com. I truly hope you guys are getting something from this. And again, feel free to leave us a comment, a criticism, a question, a share, a save, a like, or whatever, a follow. We appreciate it all. I know I say it every week, but the whole idea behind this is truly not for any sort of financial gain. I'm just trying to help musicians, man, because this industry's been wonderful to me, and I'm a big believer that it could be wonderful to you too. So until next time, my name's Travis Mark. You've been listening to The Musician's Mentor. If you know anybody who you think would benefit from hearing this, please share it with them. I appreciate you. Have a great day. Keep pushing towards your dreams. Laters.